I knew nothing about Life Action, never heard the word revival. I was wanting to be in a Christian rock group.
I walked out on the guy I was engaged to.
What was it like starting a family on the road?
Terrible.
And so Del Collins said, Steve, you're the revivalist. You're starting a church this Sunday. I had 1 week notice.
What was that like?
If God can bring me through cancer, he can do anything.
He's God and I'm not, and I'm okay with that.
Welcome to Changed Lives, a special limited series in which I explore the incredible stories of the people behind the scenes at Life Action, a ministry with a mission of reviving relationships through transformative events. Each of these individuals, my co-workers, have experienced God move in big and unexpected ways. The more I heard their stories, the more I thought, people need to hear this. In this series, you'll get a first-hand look at how God is working in and through the people of Life Action, the challenges they face, the faith that sustains them, and the lives being transformed along the way. Their stories are powerful. Today, I'm talking with longtime staff members and Life Action legends, Steve and Debby Canfield. We discuss how they came to know the Lord, how they met each other on the road, their heart for the church and revival, and what they hope their legacy is as followers of Christ. As you listen to today's interview, be thinking how you might play a part in changing lives. Life Action is fueled by the prayers and generosity of people like you. Maybe you'll feel led to partner with Steve and Debby, investing in the kingdom impact they're making every day. Let's jump in. Well, I am joined today by Life Action legends, Steve and Debby Canfield. Before we go backwards, I would love to know a little bit about what is your role now. So if you meet somebody out in the world and they say, oh, who are you and what do you do? How do you answer that question?
I follow Steve around the United States. No, I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and I teach the ladies in the church and work with the girls on the team.
Okay. All right, Steve, how about you?
I lead a team of 17 college-age kids, and we travel across the country in churches, and I'm the main speaker for one of our teams on the road.
When did you start with Life Action? And it might be a different answer for both of you.
It is, yeah.
I came in 1974 in July.
1974. Okay.
And I came 6 months later in January of 75.
Okay, wonderful. Well, then if you came here first, I'm going to start with you because you've been here longer. What brings you both here to Life Action? And I want to dive into your story, but I want to start by asking, where are you from originally?
Muncie, Indiana.
Okay, Muncie, Indiana. And what brought you to Life Action?
Del Faisenfeld Jr. Came to our church. He was asked to come and be the youth pastor. And it was between our church and I think 2 other churches. And one of them was in Florida, where he ended up going and starting Life Action from. Life Action then came to our church after they got started in 1973.
Okay.
And God just changed my life. I was engaged to be married.
Not to me.
To Steve. I didn't even know who he was. The guy I was engaged to was not saved. And God just interrupted my life. And I totally surrendered to him. I was saved when I was in 7th grade, but there was something different about all of them. Well, then Del asked me to come and sing with the team, but my dad said no because I was in my junior year of college. My life got worse. After about 2 months, I started doing things I'd never done before. And then on my 21st birthday, I walked out on the guy I was engaged to. And I said, I can't do this. This isn't what God wants for me. And I'm done with this lifestyle. And I walked out and I got so sick. It was like God just took all the sin and was cleansing me from head to toe. I'll never forget it. I thought I was going to die. But instead, the next morning, I woke up and I had so much peace and so much joy. To this day, I can't get over it. I worked for my father at the pharmacy, went to work, Life Action called
That day.
and said, Debbie, we really need you. We start training camp in 2 weeks. Will you please reconsider coming? I said, I don't have to. I know God wants me there.
Wow.
And I ended up going.
Wow, that's an incredible story. And what was your dad's reaction to that?
At that point, well, I had one more year of college left, but I think they were so excited about what they could see that God was doing in my life that they said yes. There was a pharmacist that worked for my dad, and they had a falling out. They were best friends. At that Life Action crusade back then, God put their friendship back together. And matter of fact, those people still support us today.
Wow. So your dad probably saw God working in his life and then recognized that same thing for you. And that's a really amazing story. Did you grow up then in a Christian home? It sounds like it.
No, my parents weren't saved till after I was.
Oh.
And so they were in their late 30s and I was in 7th grade.
Can you tell me a little bit about you being in 7th grade and being saved then? What was the story behind that?
Well, we went to this little country church. I didn't realize before that my babysitters and stuff would read about Jesus to us, but it didn't make any sense to me. I mean, we went to a Methodist church and, you know, God loves you kind of thing. Well, there was a falling out there. So we went to the little church, and that night, on a Wednesday night, they talked about Jesus and what he did on the cross for me. And I went back with the doctor's wife, Mrs. Butts, and we sat there and she opened up the Word of God to me and told me the whole story again. But I didn't do anything there. It wasn't till I got home, and that's when I knelt beside my bed and said, God, I need you. I want you to change my life. I want you to come into my life and change me. I'll live for you. And I ran downstairs and told my mom and dad, and they were just like, what is happening? And so I knew God changed me, because the next day I went in the cafeteria and I told everybody about Jesus and what had happened to me.
Wow. That's a great story. Thanks for telling me about that. And I love to see how those seeds were planted even early on. And we'll get back to this, but I'm sure you talk to mothers, even young mothers who are worried that maybe they're not doing enough, or maybe like how are they sharing this story with their young ones? And so it's always great to hear that like you recognize that those seeds were planted long before. So then we fast forward and you get a phone call from Life Action the day after and you decide to join.
Yeah. 2 weeks later I came.
Okay. All right. I'm going to put a pin in it. Your turn. So tell me, what was life like? Where are you from? And then what's your Life Action story?
My story is not nearly as exciting as hers.
It's hard to beat that one.
Spiritual, that's for sure. I grew up in Oregon, and my goal in life was just to have fun, play basketball, and whatever. So I went to a Bible college in Salem where I could play basketball. I wasn't good enough to play at Oregon State. Went to the Bible college, played basketball, and there was a guy on my team. Life Action came to his church. And so he joined Life Action. So I was a 5th-year senior. I'd gone to 3 different colleges at that point. And he called me in the middle of the year and said, hey, why don't you come and travel and see America? I knew nothing about Life Action, never heard the word revival. I knew nothing about even what we did here. I was wanting to be in a Christian rock group. I played the guitar. They needed a guitarist and a singer. And I was marginal at both. But Randy got me here, and it was like a whole new world, because I saw people. I grew up in the church, was saved at a young age, parents been in church all my life, but I never saw people lived what I heard preached. And I got here, and all of a sudden, people weren't just talking about the Christian life, they were actually living the Christian life in front of me. And it transformed my thinking about the whole thing. I said, well, I don't know what these people have, but it's more than I have, and I want what they have. So I came in the middle of the year, and that next year, half our ministry left. They started another ministry, and so there was not very many of us that were returning for the next year as a team, only 3 guys actually, and we had 2 teams to field. And so one of the guys was put in charge of that team, and I was put in charge of the other team. I'd been here 6 months. It's kind of the story of my life with Life Action. They looked around and said, well, I guess Steve can do it. And so I started doing that, and then about 6 months later, they needed somebody to teach teens. They looked around and said, well, nobody else, I guess Steve can do it. So I started teaching the teenagers, and then we got married, and then they needed somebody to teach the family, and they looked around and said, well, Steve's got 1 kid, I guess he can do it. And so it was just kind of like, I never was called to preach, I was never prepared for ministry, I was just there, the door opened, and I walked through the door that got opened.
Yeah.
So God knew, God had a way. Some people got calls on Damascus Road, go to Africa, that kind of thing, which is fine. But for me, my pastor in high school said, if you haven't been called, try volunteering. And so I think a lot of people are waiting for some great big momentous, do this. And I just walked, and the door opened, and God said, go through that door, and I said, okay, I guess, sure. That's kind of where I am at this point.
Yeah. That obedience has led to fulfilling your life's calling that you maybe didn't set out before you, because you thought you were going to play basketball and travel.
Well, I was going to coach. I was going to coach and probably be a high school science teacher and coach basketball or football. And God had something else for me. And I wouldn't trade it, but it sure was not on my plans.
Right, right. What did your parents think?
Well, I was a 5th-year senior, so I had 9 hours left to graduate, and they knew nothing about Life Action either. I said, hey, I'm gonna, go leave school in 9 hours short, and they were not thrilled, obviously, and they thought I was stupid. But after Jim and I got married, I went back and finished my 9 hours, and so I get a degree. But they were not thrilled.
Yeah. So, Debbie, when you come here, what did you think you were coming to do? What was it really like?
Well, my parents drove me to one of the cabins. I walked in, I saw all these girls in this dresses. I wore blue jeans and sweatshirts all the time.
Yes.
And they all had their hair looking real pretty and their makeup. And I walked in and I walked out and I looked at my parents and I said, I am leaving. I am not supposed to be here. And they said, Debbie, you told them you'd stay and you're going to get in there and you're going to stay. I can't do this. So I walked back in. Those girls became some of my best friends. Some were in my wedding. It was a culture shock.
So was it a production? What was it like? What were you doing?
In the morning, we had classes with Dr. Ed Heinzen. Then we had, in the afternoons and evenings, we had rehearsal all day long. We recorded albums.
It was choral. That was the point.
It was choral. And so we had mic partners.
Okay.
And the guy that brought him was my mic partner.
I see. Okay.
We'd sing a lot of different choral songs, and then Dale would get up and preach for the next hour and a half.
Okay. And then you would get on a bus and go to another church.
Yeah, we would usually go from, we'd get there on Saturday and set up and started Sunday morning, went to Friday night, load up, get on the bus, travel all night to the next place on Saturday.
Wow. Was it fun?
I always think everything's fun.
It's an experience.
We also did high school assemblies,
Yeah.
which was really neat because we got to, afterwards, the kids would come up and talk to us and we'd get to share Jesus with them. And that was just really neat to see so many kids come to know the Lord. That was all day. Then we'd go back and rehearse and start the service that night. And usually get home about 10:30 or 11 and start again.
Did it all over again. Yeah.
But I was young.
Yeah. right. You can do a lot of things on a lot less sleep when you're younger. So then how do your two paths converge? Because you're here for 6 months before he gets here. So how do you two meet?
Well, I came, and she'd already gone through all the guys on the team already that already liked her, and so, and Randy had told me, he said, I know who your wife's going to be, so.
Randy was your friend from
Yeah, he was my
college?
friend, yeah.
Okay.
But we just met on the team. I showed up, and she had her white go-go boots on, which was the style then at that point. And she was, she was homecoming queen and prom queen and head cheerleader, and she was, the star of everything. And I was just a normal, nobody. But yeah, she was lovely and full of fun, and we then became night partners, and
best friends.
yeah.
And now what was it about him that you thought, okay, this can be my husband?
Well, at first I thought, no way, Lord. I am not. This can't be. But then I used to sometimes travel with Dell and his family, take care of them while Dell and Judy could be together. One time we were traveling and I would always stay up with the guys to keep them awake at night while we traveled to the next place. So we were in this long caravan, and we were driving one of the Airstreams for one of the families. Steve was in the back sleeping, and I was keeping Andy awake, and a truck came alongside of us, and Andy had never driven an Airstream before, and we started swirling. And I remember saying, Lord, just help my parents to know that I'm with Jesus and it's okay, and don't let them grieve too much. Because I thought it was done. And we started flipping, and we flipped into a field, was it? And so Steve woke up and took charge. And he did all that. He found a truck driver.
We were last in the caravan, so the rest of the team went on.
They didn't even know.
Before cell phones,
And so we got in this truck with this strange truck driver, and I almost sat on his lap because I was scared to death.
Yeah.
But we got up to the guy. Well, the thing that really happened was a couple days later, Vernon came in, and we were all okay, hurt ourselves a little, but we were fine. Came in to team meeting and said, I need a guy to go into the trailer. The guys didn't dump the trailer before we left. So it's full of sewage, but I need you to go in and retrieve all the stuff you can for Patty. And Steve volunteered to do that. And I thought, any guy that would do that will make a wonderful husband and father.
That's
and
great.
so
then how long did you date before you asked her to marry you?
that summer, she came out to visit my parents and California.
that was about 3 months after the wreck.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, today when you get engaged, you got to have, people writing stuff in the sky, and you're doing jumbotrons. So, that back in that day, I didn't know. I just asked her one day and said, hey, you want to get married, knelt down on the front porch of her dad's house anyway. So we were married the next summer, a year later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say this story because this is Lori's favorite story about our first kiss. She came out to California, and I have epilepsy, and I have grand mal seizures. And it usually happens right when I get up in the morning. And so we were getting ready to go to San Diego to the zoo, and got up and I had a seizure. And after I have a seizure, I'm kind of just out of it for a while. I don't remember waking up or whatever. So
You don't remember
so
anything.
I went back to bed, and my mom said to Debbie, just go, sit by his bedside, and he'll sleep for a couple hours, and then he'll be okay.
Well, she said, he'll try to wake up. Just tell him to lay back down. Okay.
So a couple hours later, we're driving I'm back up, and we're on our way to San Diego, and Debbie's kind of really like antsy, and I'm so like, what's the problem? She said, well, I said, no, what's the problem? And apparently, she says, I sat up, I kissed her, and laid back down, and allegedly that happened. I have no clue
I
of that.
remember our first
And
kiss.
so that was our first kiss. She's guilty about it. I'm not, because I have no recollection of it even happening.
So when you get married, was it a question if you were going to stay with Life Action, or did you just resolve that you were planning on staying here?
I had no plan. I had no anything.
He worked at camp that summer.
Okay.
Was
that when it was just a youth camp?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He worked there, and we lived at the West Wind Apartments. And then he was going to go to school to finish his last 9 hours.
Well, I went for about 2 months, actually, and then Life Action called me back and said, we need you back on the road. The guy that had taken my place wasn't working out real well.
Not knowing I was pregnant.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
So for our first, they took us off the road, and we came back and worked at headquarters. Okay. And he did scheduling for a while.
Oh.
Well, I was doing a weekend conferences with Ed Alba.
Just at churches across the country?
Well, within driving distance.
Okay,
gotcha. I did teens, I did the family, and
I sang.
Yeah. So that was for a while.
What was the size of it back then? Like, were we in different churches all over all the time? Were there smaller teams, bigger teams?
There was 2 teams at the time. We were in some large churches and some small churches, and it kind of ebbed and flowed. At the end, there was a period of time there where all the independent fundamental churches decided we couldn't be ministering in their church because we went to a Southern Baptist church. And
because
so
you went to a Southern Baptist church.
We went to one, and they said, if you're gonna go to Southern Baptist churches, you can't go to our churches. We kind of got ostracized from the original start of Life Action was Bob Jones circles. Bob Jones is on our board. And so at that point in the mid-'70s, they said, no more, you can't come to us because you're going to churches that we don't agree with. So we went through times of in the biggest churches, then we went to the smallest churches, then we started in another camp, BBF churches, and so we kind of went to bigger churches again. So we've kind of had this ebb and flow throughout the, throughout the whole
Were
scenario.
you ever worried during that time, like maybe this is it, or maybe Life Action's done?
Sure. We started one year, we didn't have a schedule. We had one church, the first one out, and the rest of the schedule wasn't booked. So we went on the road and said, well, we'll just see what happens the second week. And so I got in one church and then found a church in the area and then moved to another church and scheduled as we went, which is not a great thing to do.
So this was during the early years that you were here. You told the airplane story, and I think it deserves telling again in this setting because it just seems so unbelievable.
Well, because we lost this one team, then Dell, we have 2 teams now scheduled, but only one revivalist, which was Dell. So he'd leave on Friday night, take a train, get to where the other team was, and so anyway, knowing that was coming, he said, what I need is a plane. I need to be able to fly back and forth. So he asked to start praying for a plane. My friend Randy said, hey, why don't we fast? And I said, sure. What does that mean? And so he said, well, you don't eat. So that doesn't sound very fun. He said, no, we're going to fast. So we said, okay, we're going to fast every other day for 30 days to get this plane. And so the next morning I come in, and it's like I'd never missed a meal in my life. And I walked in and I said, I didn't have breakfast today. It's like, and I think we're 30 days of this. And we went on this, it was a liquid fast. We could just drink liquids. And so I said to him, I said, well, are milkshakes liquids? He said, yeah. So we went across to Dairy Queen. So every meal for 30 days, we lived on a milkshake fast. It was really sacrificial, giving up all that. And so we'd get into a new town, where's the Dairy Queen? Because we lived at Dairy Queen for every other day for 30 days, we fasted for this plane. The reality of the plane had nothing to do with us. But God did provide a plane, and God gave us this $1 million plane, and there was a pilot who worked for Jerry Falwell who raised his support to come fly it, and this businessman said, I got these 2 planes, I don't use both of them, you can have one. He paid for the maintenance, upkeep, all we paid was for fuel. And so for that next year, this guy would fly in wherever we were at, and Friday, and he would pick Dell up, and Dell would fly to the next team, and some guys would get, and they'd drive his trailer to there, but he would fly back and forth, and for 2 years we had a Learjet at our disposal that God provided for us to get back and forth.
We also, during those times, had headquarters on the road.
We had a semi-truck that was the headquarters.
So it was a traveling headquarters. So it wasn't even like, was there headquarters back in this area?
Yet.
Okay.
And so the semi-truck would drive through the night. So it had an office set up so Dell could go to his office in that semi-truck.
Well, I think it's helpful to tell those stories and look back, because we like to think that what we're in now is what it's always been.
Yeah.
Or, you know, and it's when you tell the stories, it's like, well, it's always been needing God and he provides and just trusting in that. And so there's like a sense of comfort, even though these stories are really funny, they really do provide a sense of comfort, right? So talk about those early days. You get married and now you're on the road and you're pregnant with the first baby and then you have first baby. What was it like starting a family on the road?
Terrible. I was in a motel all the time.
Oh.
And I was sick constantly. And he had to leave early in the morning to do the high school assemblies with the team. And I would go in then about 4 o'clock at night and practice and eat and sing with the team. And then we'd get back to the hotel at 10:30.
And then once you have your family, though, and you're still just walking on this path, what is that like when you start having kids and you're continuing to travel?
A year later, I left as a youth pastor. I was still doing Life Action stuff on some of the weekends, so it kind of sounded like quasi. I did that for a year. I coached basketball at this Christian school and was a youth pastor. And a year later, again, Life Action called me back, and they said, okay, this time we're going to give you a trailer and put you on the road. So we came back.
I got my trailer.
We got our trailer. And then she was pregnant with our second child, Jeremiah. And then, this is like 1979 now. And so Nancy DeMoss comes along, and they write this program called America, You're Too Young to Die. I'm leading the red team, Dell's the revivalist, and Dell goes off the road for a year. And so prior to the elections in 1980, we go on the road for basically 9 months, different church every night. We've got a motorhome we live in, 2 kids. Jeremiah, our second son, learned to walk driving down the freeway. And we're doing this program. We do it at night. We get in, we drive through the night to the next place, and we did this 250 nights out of a year, probably ministered to 250,000 people. I'm 28 years old. I preached in Adrian Rogers' church, Charles Stanley's church, Jerry Falwell's church, James Kennedy's church. The biggest church on the West Coast was Tim LaHaye, who now is David Jeremiah's church. I'm just a nobody. I still haven't been called to preach, right? So, and we're in the biggest churches. And we did a thing in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. Jerry Falwell spoke, 9,000 people in this auditorium. And we're doing this program, Amway conventions. We're doing this thing. They take it, goes on a national, DeMoss Foundation puts it on TV, and it's the narrator is the guy that does all the Herbie movies. Dean Jones, he's the narrator. Reagan's in it. All these guys are in it, talking, and it was a huge deal. That was 1980, and then the next year, Dell comes back on the road, and so now I'm teaching the family. So now I'm the family seminar guy, and worship leader, and doing teens. Yeah, and we had 2 kids, and we're on the road with Dell. And in 1983, Dell said, I want you to go to this other team, so it's more like, so the team, it's kind of like there was a big team and a little team. And Dell said, I want the teams to be more the same, so I want you to go be on this team and kind of help it be what this team is. We got one summit out with that team, and the revivalist went off the road. And so Dell called and said, Steve, you're the revivalist. You're starting a church this Sunday. I had 1 week notice.
So up until that point, you've just been the
I was family worship
and youth. Yes.
Yeah.
And so now you're the main guy.
Now on this team, I am the revivalist, the family guy, the teen guy, and the worship guy. And it was the Steve Canfield show, basically, because that was it. And so that was 1983. And then finally I got somebody to come and help me do worship, and somebody helped me do teens, and eventually, and I did family until 91, until Steve Hammock came and joined me. Dell was the red team, I was the blue team.
How did you learn just by watching Dell or watching other revivalists? Like when you had 1 week notice, what are you saying to yourself? What are you praying for in that week? And how did you know what to do?
You know, when they talk about, discipleship and mentoring and so forth, Dell was certainly our mentor. discipler, but he never sat down with the book and said, okay, let's walk through the 1 John. I was just with him, and I was with him in staff meetings. I was with him on the front row every night in the service. I'd heard him over and over again. I watched him, I listened to him, and he discipled me just by his presence. I just personalized the things that I'd heard him communicate out of my own life, and it, you know, it worked.
He was already a good preacher.
What was it like for you?
A year after I had been on the team, we were at a meeting where there was a really big split. 2 big churches split, and families were split. People in the community were split. It was a mess. And Dale comes to me and says, I want you to have a prayer meeting with the ladies. And I'm like, I was like, what do I do? What do I say? But he says, you'll know what to do. Just get with Jesus. And so I did. And I had my first prayer meeting.
Wow.
God put those churches back together. But that's what gave me a love for women, was that prayer meeting. And so while I was raised in my family on the road, God gave me opportunities to have prayer meetings with anybody that just wanted to come. I'd just pray with them. And in that, I started teaching them. And then
You did them like every day for a while.
for a while,
Really?
I did them every
Like
day at
noon prayer-
10:30.
10:30, yeah.
Yeah.
Ladies prayer
Yeah.
meetings.
And just any women could come?
Anybody.
Was it a lot of pastors' wives, or was it just any
It
women?
was both.
Okay.
Yeah, staff.
I
and-
remember one time I went in and nobody showed up. And I thought, okay, Lord, I'm here. I'll just pray. Well, the pastor's wife came in. And she and I, for the next hour, were able to pray and share. If anybody else would have been there, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So that also sparked in me a love for the staff wives. And so then I started doing things where I could be with them, like lunches or stuff like that. I started having so many kids, I couldn't do the prayer meetings every day. So every Wednesday, I did a seminar. So then after that, I started, people started working more. And so the ladies weren't able to come and they wanted to. So that's when I started the ladies'
Luncheon.
luncheon.
So very organic. I just assumed that ladies' luncheon was just part of the program we put in. But it sounds like it was born out of just this organic opportunity for you to connect and for the women of the church to feel seen and heard and loved. And
after Nancy came, she started going into churches with Dell.
okay.
And so she started doing the prayer times and teaching the word and stuff. So I was able to learn then even more under her.
Then in 83, we split from Dell and Nancy, and we became our own.
And
Your own team.
Yeah.
That's when I started doing all the different
I
things.
gotcha.
So I could minister.
And all of that sounds amazing. And I have 4 children at home. And I'm in the back of my head, I'm thinking, how are they doing all of this while raising kids? Like, practically speaking, you're on the road, you're in a trailer. Kids have needs and they temper tantrums and all that thing. Like, what was that like?
It was hectic at times, but you just learn to deal with what you had.
And the one component that we had too was we had 20 plus college age kids traveling with us.
Yeah.
So even as the kids started having greater school needs beyond capacity that we had to meet that, then some of the team members would take them for math or take them for a class. And so there, we did have some help in relationship to that.
Once they got to be about 6 or 7, second grade, we would have tutors with us. And so we'd go into a church and set up a schoolroom so that the kids felt like they were going to school every day. Anytime you raise a family, you just need lots of grace.
And I think you adjust to God gives you grace to whatever your schedule is. I mean, you know, we our kids were never in bed before 10 o'clock at night because we were in services till 9:30. And so we adjusted to that in our morning schedule, and
Yeah.
yeah,
It was your normal.
it was the norm.
So
yeah.
it's hard to compare it because that's what it was. And I can imagine from the kids' perspective, having all these young adults with them was probably pretty cool. Like siblings and tutors and friends and mentors.
I heard someone say that if you raise your kids to relate to adults, when they become adults, they'll be leaders. If they can only relate to kids their own age, when they become adults, they'll be followers. And so our kids, all their life, were around adults, learned to relate to adults. So our sons, they went to college. They were the freshman class president. They'd never gone to school before, but because they had learned how to relate to adults, they became leaders. And two of them are pastors, two of them on the mission field. They are leading things because they had an environment where they got to practice that.
They went to church. They wanted to go to church every night, most of them.
That was their social life.
That was their social life. So we would go to church every night. And I loved going to church every night just to hear the message, whether it was Dell or Steve. Then they started getting older, so they were able to work in the clubs. And then after working in the clubs, then they started singing. And then they started teaching teens. So we tried to make them a part of our ministry.
And how many children did you have?
We have 6.
6 children. So here's a question that probably people want to know. You are raising a family, you're in close community with everybody, but you're married. So what happens when you have disagreements on the road and you're all living in the same living space, but then you're surrounded by how did you learn how to navigate that?
I think every family is different in the way that there's stuffers and shouters. And I'm more of a stuffer. I never heard my dad yell at me. As far as I know, I've never yelled at my kids. I'm not a outward processor in that way. So if there was disagreements, then we would talk about them privately. You go in some homes and you think, man, everybody's mad at each other, but that's just the decibel level that they talk at. So in the home I grew up in, the decibel level was very low.
And the home I grew up in is very high. And I had to learn to come down.
Yes. Well, and then I can imagine too, you're talking to families, and so you almost have to live it out. Otherwise, I mean, you're so on display that the things that you're talking about with families every night in the church, your kids are hearing that, and yeah.
And I'm repeating it every week. And so there's something about just, I don't want to ever talk further down the road that I'm living. And so if I'm talking to people about kids and I'm not living that, then that's not going to fly. So
he was a great dad. He'd have a couple hours or an hour, he'd come home and play with them. And was there when I needed help or I didn't think I could handle anything anymore or, those kind of things. So
has the heart of Life Action always been what it was when you came here? And I guess maybe we should say, what is the heart of Life Action? I guess that's a good question.
Well, I think as we talked with pastors even today, I mean, our desire is to come in and to help the church become healthy. And if a church is healthy, then it's going to be reproducing. If it's healthy, it's going to be attracting others because they want that same health that they see. And so from the very beginning, our desire is to be able to come into church and help a church be more healthy than it was when we came. And that's continued to be our ministry. That's our heart. How do we do that? What does that look like? What's the format that takes? Those things certainly change. The methods have changed a lot from Life Action, but the message is still the same. And it's to come in and lift the arms of the pastor, to help him be healthy, to make sure that he's healthy, that his staff is healthy, that the focus is on their personal walk, their personal family, their closest ministries. Most churches end up, I find, jump over their personal walk, pastors do, over their need of their wife, over the need of their leadership, over the need of their congregation, and they're trying to, let's go win the world. And so what we're saying is, if you want to win the world, which is a great commission command, but let's go back and take all these other relationships and let's start with you and Jesus, you and your wife, you and your kids, you and your staff, you and your deacons, you and your leadership, and let's take care of these relationships. And then as a healthy body, then we have something to offer to the world. And that's what we've done for over 50 years.
But we also started, when I came, with praying diligently that God would send a heaven-sent revival and to our country. And that's what spoke to me when Dell, I wanted that so bad. Because of the mess I made of my life in college, I didn't want others to go through that. And so we started praying for the big R and for revival. And I think over the years, it's gone more to individuals and the importance. If individuals don't have revival, then we're not going to see that big R revival.
But we talk about the big R revival, little R revival. Big R revival is the sovereign work of God that he does. We call them the Great Awakenings. Only he can do that.
And
we pray for that, but that's between him and the Trinity. Little R revival is personal revival. And the balance between praying for the big R revival, but still preaching to little R revival has been a constant tension for us. And sometimes we've got focused on big R and not little r and some back and forth, but that tension between those two is always been here. Someone has said what we can do is set our sails to catch the winds of heaven, so when God blows through, we're prepared. So our desire is to help people set their sails, so when the big R wind of revival blows, the sails are set and they're ready to receive that. So that's kind of the balance.
Do you think that in today's world, is there more of a need for little R revival than there was 50 years ago? Or do you think it's always been the same need?
I think the decadence of our culture now makes the distinction between revival and the revived and unrevived even greater. So it looks like, wow, there's a greater need. The need has always been there. It's always been an issue, but the world's running off a cliff, and so we're more desperate than ever before.
And what are your thoughts on that?
I think people years ago, when Life Action first started, the first 10, 20 years, it was a good thing to go to church. Whether they were saved or not, that's another thing. But people went to church. That's just what you did. And you got involved in church. Where now, the last 10, 20 years, it's not even important. If we go once a month, twice a month, we're okay. I don't know if people really realize their need for the Lord.
I'm trying to make a distinction and not even use the word Christian anymore. Because the word Christian means nothing in our culture anymore. You can be a Christian and be about whatever you want to be. I'm trying to use a terminology, a follower of Christ. And there's a lot of people that in the early days, Christian nation, Christian, go to church, I'm a Christian, but were they really followers of Christ? I don't know. But today, there's a big distinction between followers of Christ and those that are not. And my desire is to help a group of people say, I don't want to just say I'm a Christian because I go to that church or carry a Bible, but I am a follower of Christ. I am a disciple. And there's I think the gap is greater today because the way our culture is. But
Are people surprised by how much they need God? Do you think that when you come in there, they don't actually think maybe that they need God as much as they do? And I only say that because I read a lot of the letters, and a lot of the letters say, I wasn't planning on going. I just felt like I had, so I showed up. I wasn't even like interested, or I didn't feel like I needed to go. And then it's like, whoa, God hit him like, yep, you're right here where you're supposed to be.
My synopsis of the culture of the church today is, the bottom line is, we love Jesus, but we don't need Jesus. Everybody says they love Jesus, but they don't need Jesus. And so when we go in and say, here's what your need looks like, and they're like, wow, I really do need that. then that's an eye-opener for most people, because they're just used to drifting through the culture of, yeah, I love Jesus, yeah, I'm a Christian, yeah. But when we come in and say, well, here's what that looks like, here's what a disciple looks like, here's what that means, and then they realize what happens if they will obey those truths and follow, and that's where there's a difference, heart change.
I've heard you say that we're not bringing new truths. We're just, we're talking about obedience to old truths.
People walk up and they shake hands with truth. They say, I agree with that truth. That's a good truth. But there's a difference between shaking hands with truth and embracing the truth. And we don't really want to embrace the truth. We'll give mental assent. Oh, yeah, I think we should do that. Yeah, I think I should do that. But embracing that truth as a part of your life, that's a different story. But until that happens, you're not going to know the peace. And right now, we live in a culture of anxiety, and there's little peace. And they're looking at the world saying, well, I'm more peaceful than the world. But that is not the peace that the Word of God talks about. And when they see there's a peace that the world can't give, the world can't take away, and what that looks like, and I can have that, it's like, I want that.
And has that been the story for the last 5 decades? Do you see that happen in church time and time again?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Speak to the women's side of that. What has your experience been? And because you still continue to have women's luncheons, and you still seem as passionate about pouring into women as you described being back when it first started.
The main thing that women have come and talked to me afterwards, they thank me for being open and honest and transparent. I don't pull any punches. I tell them if I've had a rough day that morning, if I yelled at my husband. I just let them know where life really is, because I know what they're living because I'm living it too. And so I try to share with them that, none of us are going to be perfect till we see Jesus, but he's always working on us. And he just wants us to grow one step at a time, one day at a time.
And that's almost like the power of the idea of life action, right? Is that life in action and living that out? People seem really drawn to that. Yeah.
They want honesty, and they don't want somebody standing up and saying, we got it all together, so it'd be like us. But just them say, we're broken, and here's how we're dealing with that, and here's how you can deal with that.
Yeah.
Because everybody's broken.
The 7 responses to God, that is part of what you all talk about. Have those been consistently what we've talked about throughout the years? Has that been like a formation of those thoughts throughout the years?
What happened was, some years ago, some of our guys said, well, how should we respond to truth? And so here's all these truths that we're giving out. Well, we want to respond, first of all, by honesty. We want to be open about what's going on here. And we want to respond in humility, acknowledging our own need. We want to respond in repentance, turning from those things. We want to respond in ways that are compassionate, reflecting the compassion of God. And we want to have radical obedience to those things that God is showing us. And then ultimately we want to take those things and live them out so that we can impact our world. So it's not really that those truths are what we preach. It's basically those are a response to every time God shows you truth. You should respond honestly, yeah, that's me. You should respond brokenly in humility. You respond in repentance to turn. It's not enough just to acknowledge, but there's got to be a change. We respond compassionately, being compassionate to those that are wrong, and then thanking God for the compassion he shows to us. And then we want to introduce, here's what radical obedience looks like. And I think that's where a lot of times the breakdown is. We can say, I just love Jesus, which we should, but here's what that's going to look like in your practical life. And then when the world sees that, they're going to say, wow, whatever you have, that's what I want.
That's what I want.
Most people, they already know what they need to do. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that if I'm involving myself in sin, I should stop. Okay? It's just, I've not come to the point where I'm going to do that because I have not really been broken over my
Gotcha.
sin yet. It's not just a list of do's and don'ts, but the passions that we have are God-given. Temptation is the enticement to satisfy a God-given desire in a God-forbidden way. And so what we have done is we're trying to say, you have a passion for God, but you're putting that passion into music or video games or a relationship or someplace else. The passion is not wrong, but let's redirect that passion to where it needs to be, which is to Christ. And when you take that same passion that you have, great passion, but make sure that you're getting that need met, not from the acceptance of people or from all the things you can produce or from the God of certainty that you know it's going to happen, but you're looking to the Prince of Peace. And when you find your security there, that passion that you have, not a bad passion, it's just you've been getting it met someplace other than Jesus.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful. And as you've been living this out, like, how has God met you in the process? And I know the times are too countless, to talk about, but are there some moments in your journey where, God met you and has just changed you? Like, we're talking about transformation all the time, but how has God transformed you?
I think when I got cancer, I was a very fearful person and fearful about the future, fearful about how my kids were going to grow up, everything. And God used that to kind of overwhelm me with the fact that He's my hope. Not whether my kids grow up and be how I think they should be, or will have enough money to do this or that, or whatever it may be. Since my cancer 3.5 years ago, there's been a more peace in my life. If God can bring me through cancer and give me peace, He can do anything because He's my hope.
That gives other people who are maybe just starting on their journey of following Jesus, it gives people hope to know, oh, I'm not actually trying to achieve perfection, because that's impossible. I'm just trying to take the next right step and to be faithful. Neither of you are sitting here claiming we've arrived, right?
You won't hear that from me.
I just want you to talk a little bit about these college-age kids that go on the road with you. Why that's such a special part of what Life Action does.
So we get to go into church for a short period of time, and then we get a long-term impact over these college-age kids. They're for the most part desirous of taking the next step and what's right for God. And I think I counted up, we've had like 600 college-age students that we've had on our teams over the last years. That's so fulfilling and rewarding and a blessing.
Just watching team members over the years come and then God transformed their lives as we poured into them and as they heard the messages and God spoke to them. And I even had somebody this week come to me and tell me, say, my life was changed through Life Action. And I hear that over and over and over.
There's so much power in living out what you hear, right? Not just being hearers of the word, but doers. There's so much power in that. The thing I love about you when you talk about it is you always talk about your girls on the road. Do they hold a special place in your heart, it seems like?
Yeah, when I came, the wives kind of stayed in their trailers. And I loved them. I'd go on in the trailers knocking and seeing if I could talk to them. I needed somebody to mentor me. And so I decided that's what I was going to do, is start mentoring the girls on the team. I tell them now I'm their grandma. So now I can hug a lot and tell them things. I had 5 boys before Anna. And so they were my girls.
I love that. So as we look to kind of the next phase of Life Action, and we're going into the 54th year What's your hope for this ministry that you have just poured your life into?
Obviously, I hope for stability and consistency, and that we would not ever sway from the things that we're founded on. And I think God calls different ministries to different things, and God put something in the heart of the founder, Del Feld, that he would go into churches to help lift the arms of pastors and a burden for the churches in North America. And I just hope that whatever else we do, we can do a lot of things, but that is the reason that God established us and brought us up and provided an environment at the camp and in our events where people can have an experience with God that draws them into deeper relationship and causes them to fall. I tell people every time I go in, my prayer is that when we leave, you'll be more in love with Jesus than you are today. And I pray that is the continued trajectory of Life Action.
And that we would continue to love and lead people to Jesus.
All right, here's my last question. Years from now, when you look back, what do you hope your legacy is?
I suppose that people that were under us saw our love for Jesus and that we were faithful to the fight and to the end. Steve has always said, I just want to be faithful to the end. And whenever the end is for us together, we'll be faithful to the end.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I've said I want on my tombstone, faithful to the faith, faithful to the fight, faithful to the finish. So I guess that's what I want to be, is faithful and, a faithful follower of Christ.
Well, thank you both very much for talking with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Changed Lives. If you were encouraged or inspired by what you heard, I want to invite you to take the next step. You can support the people whose story you just heard and others like them by visiting lifeaction.org/changedlives. Whether through prayer, giving, or sharing these stories, you can be part of what God is doing to revive relationships and transform lives.